Carmen let out a loud scream and suddenly awoke in a cold sweat. The nightmares had become more frequent in recent times, and she was struggling to get a good night's sleep. She felt a presence in her room coming from the corner where a familiar dark figure lurked. All the logic in her brain told her it was her coat stand, and yet she stared, frozen like a statue, unable to look away. "What is wrong with me?" she thought. She continued to have a staring match with her coat stand for a good 60 seconds, the kind of minute that felt a lot longer. She was just about to turn away and gather her senses. "Why does it feel like it's staring at me? This is ridiculous," she thought, when suddenly she saw the unmistakable movement as the figure took one slow, creepy, jittery step to the side. Carmen let out a shriek. She felt bile rise up into her throat and the taste of metal in her mouth, her stomach completely betraying her in her time of need as she resisted the urge to throw up. She rolled over and out of bed and had to scramble to the table lamp only a couple of feet away, due to the fact that her legs had now completely turned to jelly. "Oh my God," she said as she reached for the lamp, with her eyes still focused like a laser on the corner of the room, unwavering. She managed to switch on the lamp and scrambled to the opposite corner of her room, preparing for whoever was there as she yelled, "Who's there? How did you get in here?" There was no reply. Carmen found herself in the corner of her room, arms shaking frantically, with her CS gas canister aimed outwards. She kept it in the drawer of her night table, shouting at her nightstand like a crazy old lady. "No, no, no," she whimpered as she finally gathered the courage to reach the nightstand. Carmen's shoulders slumped and she crumpled down to the floor. This time, she was 100% sure of either one of two things happening to her. Either she was completely losing her marbles, or something sinister had come to haunt the living crap out of her. Carmen was not a believer in ghosts. However, right then and there, she made the easy decision. "Please let it be insanity," she muttered to herself as she left the apartment to go for a late-night stroll, as was becoming more frequent as of late. She looked at her reflection in the lift as she made her way down to the lobby and saw a woman she didn't recognize. "Oh well, Carmen, it looks like sleep is off the menu again," she muttered to herself with a smile on her face. But this was not a smile of amusement, not in the slightest. This was a smile of disbelief at the events that were happening. This was a strained smile of a person struggling to hang on to everything they hold dear. "I know what I saw," she said to herself. "I know what I saw," as she walked through the reception to the outside world where she felt safe, completely unaware of the nighttime security guard greeting her as she passed him. As soon as Carmen felt the cool night air breeze across her face, she reached for her bag and lit up a cigarette. Her hands were still shaking as she tried to light it. She took a long, deep pull into her lungs, held it for as long as she could, and let the smoke out in a slow, measured manner. The apartment was fast becoming a place that she dreaded being in, which was exhausting for her just to think about. She began to walk. She needed to stay active to stop herself from overthinking things, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, she thought to herself. Sometimes the thoughts she had were enough to stop her dead in her tracks and just stand there motionless in a state of sheer fright and disbelief. But she knew that if she just kept putting one foot in front of the other, she would stay in control. As she was walking, Carmen suddenly felt a cold chill, and an unusual gust of wind blew across her and upwards behind her. She could have sworn she heard a voice whisper her name as it passed. She felt that same feeling of a presence she had felt before in her room. "What is this feeling?" she thought. With her eyes, she followed the direction of the gust of wind behind her and upwards. Her eyes immediately locked onto a strange figure of a person looking at her from the building she had just left. Carmen's hands began shaking again. She immediately recognized her outdoor table and chair next to the window where the figure was. The figure was in her apartment. She counted the floors up to her apartment in disbelief. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th floor, 5 floors up, 3 along. It was definitely her apartment. She tried to process what she was seeing and what it meant. Right then and there, she vowed never to enter the apartment again. She stayed in a hotel she found a few blocks away, but she hardly got any sleep. Carmen made a call to the police the next morning, but when they inspected, they found nothing inside the apartment. A year or two ago, my brother started to receive a call on his cell phone. always between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. each night. When he answered, he was met by this creepy-sounding noise. It was like screaming and static mixed together. After a month or so of this, he would change his number and it would stop. Then, just like clockwork, after a week or so of receiving his new number, the calls would start again at the exact same time. After he had had enough of this, concluding it was probably one of his close friends trying to prank him, he decided to call the number back. An old man answered who had no clue what he was talking about or what he was accusing him of. But still, the calls would continue. When he chose to not answer, it would ring back a few times and then stop. No messages were ever left. After some time, he decided to end his contract with the phone company, switch providers, and get another number. But as you may have guessed, the static screaming started again after a short time. By this time, he started to worry, unsure of why this was happening. When he decided to dial back the number this time, he got a completely different person on the line. Shortly after this, he ended up losing his job as well as his phone. So naturally, the calls stopped as his phone was disconnected. Things went back to normal after that. Until sometime after, my mom asked me to listen to a creepy message she had gotten on our house phone. Sure enough, it was the same creepy caller. We decided to let my brother know after some discussion, because we knew it had caused some distress, and he immediately started panicking. He ran to the phone, dialed back the number, however, this time was completely different. We could hear the faint voice of someone talking to him in the background. After about 20 seconds, his face went from shock to completely motionless. He just started staring blankly into space. After the phone call, we asked what was said, but he never replied. He just walked upstairs to his room and stayed there until the next morning. This was a year or two ago, and my brother has never been the same since. He never explained what was said or what he heard on the phone that day. Nowadays, he doesn't socialize at all, has lost all his friends and spends all day in his room. He soon after finished with his girlfriend and hasn't dated again since. Nowadays, he doesn't seem to care about his appearance and barely has an appetite. And also around once or twice a week, he wakes up out of bed screaming at the top of his lungs. What on earth did he hear that day to make him like this?